The confessional booth, a sanctuary of whispered sins and divine forgiveness, had become a tomb. Father Gustavo was found slumped inside its dark, ornate confines, his life extinguished. His eyes, wide with a terror that death had failed to erase, stared into the shadowed space. On the floor, a single polished rosary bead lay severed from its string, a broken prayer. The scene dissolves into the fury of the previous night. In the year 1551, a violent tempest clawed at the walls of a grand Gothic church in the heart of Spain. Rain and wind howled like tormented souls as the heavy oak doors groaned open, admitting a lone, cloaked figure, dripping a trail of rainwater onto the ancient stone floor. The man, the confessor, moved with a haunting purpose through the nave, his face obscured by the deep shadows of his hood. He found Father Gustavo near the altar, the elderly priest tidying away the communion vessels. The confessor's voice, when it came, was a low, desperate whisper that barely carried over the storm's roar. He begged for an immediate confession, an urgent plea that resonated with a primal fear. Though wary of the late hour and the stranger's intensity, Father Gustavo saw a soul in profound torment. His duty was clear. With a reluctant nod, he gestured toward the confessional, its carved wooden panels promising secrecy and solace. Once inside, separated by the latticed screen, the air grew thick and heavy. The confessor did not begin with the usual litany of petty transgressions or moral failings. His words were not of sin, but of a terrible ancient secret. A burden he claimed had been passed down through generations. It was a secret, born from a cursed vow, made in a time long since faded from memory. A vow that had bound his bloodline to an unspeakable horror. The priest shifted uncomfortably, the familiar ritual of confession twisting into something alien and menacing. The man's whisper dropped even lower, becoming a chilling hiss. He spoke of a forgotten plague that had swept through these very lands centuries ago. But this was no mere disease of the flesh. It was a sentient darkness, Father, he breathed, the words seeping through the screen like a foul mist. The priest leaned closer, his heart beginning to pound against his ribs. The confessor continued, his voice trembling with a terrifying reverence. It did not kill its victims, it consumed them. And now, it has returned for the church that betrayed it. The frame freezes on Father Gustavo's face, a mask of pure, unadulterated horror, as the chilling prophecy hangs in the suffocating silence of the booth. The air inside the confessional grew cold, a damp chill that had nothing to do with the stone and everything to do with the voice on the other side of the screen. Father Gustavo sat frozen, his own breath catching in his throat, as the man, the confessor, laid bare a history darker than any sin. He spoke of betrayal, not by men, but by the very founders of this sacred place. A sudden, vivid image flashed through Gustavo's mind unbidden. A circle of ancient monks, their faces grim under flickering torchlight, chanting in a forgotten tongue. Below them, in a freshly dug pit beneath the church's foundation, a formless, shadowy entity writhed and clawed, being forced down, bound by a ritual of stone and prayer. The vision was so real he could almost smell the damp earth and burning incense. The confessor's voice, a low and steady rumble, pulled him back. He revealed he was not just any man, but the last of a lineage, a bloodline sworn for centuries to stand guard. It is a cursed vow, Father, he explained, his tone heavy with the weight of generations. A burden passed from father to son, a sacred duty to keep the darkness contained. We are the guardians of the seal, and I am the end of the line. He spoke of a life lived in the shadow of this promise, a life devoid of choice, dedicated solely to reinforcing the mystical prison that held the entity captive. Every prayer, every moment of vigilance, was a stone added to the wall of its cage. As the confession continued, the church itself seemed to respond to the grim tale. One by one, the candles guttered and died, their flames pinching out as if starved of air. A faint, sibilant whispering slithered from the empty corridors, sounding like 1,000 dry leaves skittering across stone. In the periphery of his vision, Father Gustavo saw the shadows in the corners of the small booth deepen and writhe, pulsing with a life of their own. The confessor's voice grew strained, cracking with a desperate urgency. "It starves, Father," he rasped. "After all these centuries, the seal weakens. My strength is not enough anymore." The man described the entity's hunger, a terrifying, insatiable craving. It did not desire souls, as Gustavo had first feared. Its famine was for something far more fundamental. It fed on the light, on the very faith that consecrated the ground above it. It drank the hope from prayers and twisted the sanctity of the church into a monument of despair. The holy ground was not just its prison, but its banquet, and it was slowly, inexorably, devouring the very essence of the place, turning its spiritual energy into a festering source of its own power. The weakening seal was a sign that the feast was nearing its end, and the prisoner was almost ready to break free. "Why?" Father Gustavo finally forced the word from his paralyzed lips, his voice a choked whisper. "Why have you come to me? What do you want?" There was a long, chilling silence. Then, the confessor slowly lifted his head on the other side of the screen. At that exact moment, a flash of lightning split the stormy sky outside, illuminating his face for a split second. What Gustavo saw made his blood run cold. The man's eyes were not human. They were two pools of pure, reflective blackness, twin voids that seemed to drink the light. A final, terrifying whisper snaked through the grill, heavy with resignation and dread. "I am not here for forgiveness. I am here because the seal is not just stone and prayer. It requires a sacrifice. And the Guardian's bloodline has run out." The shadow tendrils did not tear Father Gustavo apart. Instead, as they pulled him down into the suffocating darkness of the confessional, they began to converge. The swirling chaos of shadows coalesced before him, twisting and knitting together with an unnatural precision. The darkness took shape, morphing into a perfect, horrific mimicry of the priest himself. A hollow, silent statue of shadow, with empty, gaping voids where his eyes should be. It was the entity's true form, an anti-creation that became a perfect, empty reflection of what it consumed. This was not just a demon. It was a void given form, a living blasphemy staring back at him with his own face, locking eyes with its soulless double. Father Gustavo was plunged into a vision that shattered his understanding of damnation. The entity showed him a truth far more terrifying than any hellfire or brimstone. He saw not a pit of suffering, but an abyss of absolute nothingness. A cold, silent, and infinite emptiness that existed long before creation. It was the primordial hunger of the void, a conscious oblivion yearning to reclaim every spark of light, every whispered prayer, and every flicker of faith from a universe it considered an aberration. He understood then that this creature wasn't just evil. It was the fundamental opposite of existence, and it wanted to unmake everything. He knew he could not defeat it. No prayer could banish what was never created. No exorcism could cast out the very concept of absence. But he could contain it, gathering the last fragments of his will, Father Gustavo made his final terrible choice. With his last breath, he began to pray, not for his own salvation or for deliverance, but to bind the entity to himself. He willingly offered his faith, his memories, his very being, the sum total of his soul, as a new lock on an ancient prison. His spirit would become the chains, his devotion the eternal cage. He would not banish the darkness. He would become its warden for eternity. The transfer was silent, intimate, and utterly agonizing, as Gustavo's soul was drawn from his body and woven into the fabric of the shadow, becoming one with the prison. His physical form went limp and cold in the confessional booth. His eyes, once full of weary compassion, remained open, frozen in a look of horrified, eternal vigilance. Outside the booth, the confessor, the ancient, skeletal guardian whose duty he had just inherited, finally found its release. With its long vigil fulfilled, the ancient being dissolved into a cloud of centuries-old dust, its purpose finally complete. The terrible burden had been passed. The scene fades to the quiet stillness of the next morning. Sunlight streams through the stained glass windows as the heavy church doors swing open. A few early parishioners, seeking a moment of peace, are the first to find him. There sits Father Gustavo, their beloved priest, lifeless in the confessional. To them, he simply passed away in the night. The only evidence of the terrible spiritual war he fought and won is a single, snapped rosary bead lying on the floorboards. A fallen soldier on a silent battlefield. The church is safe, the flock protected, but their shepherd has begun his eternal silent confession, forever bound to the devouring darkness he contained.
If you enjoy horror stories, click follow, like, and subscribe if you dare.